Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Christy. I'm a first year PhD student in English literature, and today I am coming at you with a October wrap up as well as a wee book haul of all the books that I have purchased in the month of October. And the reason I'm doing that is because I haven't read many books in October at all. I have read a total of 4. None of them have had anything to do with my PhD. I was really focused in the first half of the month of meeting my APR 1 deadline, and so it was really just entirely encompassed with writing, and anything that I did read tended to be book chapters or articles, things like that. But without further ado, let's just dive right in. So the first book that I read in the month of October is a poetry collection by Becky Varley-Winter called Dangerous Enough. This was okay. I was really pulled in by the ideas that this was supposed to, it has a lot of imagery from the natural world, and there's a lot of comparisons and kind of symbiotic type relations within these texts through the imagery itself, not necessarily in the characters. I hope that makes sense. But I thought it was okay. I'm really picky with my poetry, and I've read so many incredible collections this year that this one just didn't measure up for me, but I found it was really interesting that there were a lot of poems in memorial or for dedicated to other people, and I thought that the fact that there were so many of those, the form of a collection that this has taken, I think could have been done drastically different by emphasizing that in particular, and I would have been really interested to see how that could have taken shape. But as it exists, this was not my favorite. It's still okay, and poetry is really short in terms of collections to go through, especially when they're not more complex kind of language like Victorian poetry or something like that. These kind of contemporary poetry collections you can get through really quickly. And so I would still recommend it, but maybe try and get it secondhand. Then the next book I read was the only book really that I actually enjoyed this month reading, and that is Woodworm by Layla Martinez. This is a horror novel, and I specifically went into a bookshop in Edinburgh called Argonauts because they have a special Halloween tote bag design that they do every year, and to get that tote bag you essentially have to buy a horror, gothic, spooky book within their store in the month of October to get it, and I really wanted it this year, so I went there specifically with the mindset that I would be coming away with some type of horror book, but I didn't know exactly what, and I had never heard about this before, but it had just recently been released. It's one of the things with horror and gothic, I find it difficult to find within the selections. A lot of kind of bigger bookshops have, like Waterstones and stuff. It's quite difficult. I mean, again, this is what I mean. This was not at Waterstone. This was an independent bookshop, but the curation of a lot of those areas and bookshops are the same. So it's lovely going to independent bookshops and being able to find these nuggets of horror that I haven't come across before. Although I do think this is probably going to pop up quite a bit. So if you love haunted houses, I think this is a great book choice for you. It really does that trope well. If you love Shirley Jackson, if you love Daphne du Maurier, those kinds of hauntings, you will definitely love this. It's also extraordinarily short, so worth picking up. So one of the really incredible things about this book is the attention it gives to male violence against women, and specifically how that generational trauma can be passed down and how that has an impact on those lives. Essentially, the house is a character in and of itself in this text, and it is hungry and all-consuming, but that hunger definitely has a connection with this female rage that is displayed throughout. This is fantastic. I gave it 4 stars. It's translated from the Spanish, and I would highly recommend picking it up. It was my top read for this month. Then I finished a book that I have been literally reading for months. I think I started this back in July, maybe even earlier. And I was enjoying it, but I was too kind of panicked around, oh, I can't read for fun, I have to read for research. And so I finally finished it off. And I have to say, I kind of wish that I hadn't, because the ending was terrible. This is obviously from the title, it's Pride and Prometheus by John Kessel. And this is a reimagining, retelling of Pride and Prejudice, specifically focusing on the sister Mary Bennet, and obviously Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Victor and the Creature are both characters within this text. I loved the first half of this book and I was shocked, and then and then something happened. Essentially, I mean, it looks kind of like a romance. It's not a romance, but there's definitely those kind of emotions going around within the characters here. But essentially Mary Bennet is falling in love with Victor Frankenstein, who is obviously already engaged. And the relationship that these characters get into and their entanglements, all relating to the creature, is just so well done. But then after that second half of the book, there's expectations that are built up that are then just not done. Like, there's nothing that's done with it, and I thought that the ending could have been a lot more interesting. The author said that he specifically wanted to try and keep it close to the text as possible. But I don't really understand that when you're doing a reimagining or retelling, because the whole point is to reimagine these stories, and the endings are a big part of that. But more than anything else, the thing that irks me about this book is in the last 5 or 6 chapters, there's a specific point in the book where something shifts and the characters are all giving, so Victor, the Creature, and Mary Bennet all have their own point of view chapters. But it's about this very specific event, and there's some things that are still, like, are repeated by each one of those individuals in their narratives, and you don't need to read that. I was just rereading what I'd already read, if that makes sense. So that was done very poorly, in my opinion, and really just ruined the end of the book for me, because I couldn't really get back into it after that disruption. But it's also a very interesting text in terms of kind of erasure of female voices. So in this text, the bride does come into fruition. It is created by Victor, but there's things that happen that then make it easy for Victor to erase her story out of Frankenstein, essentially. That's kind of like the gist of what's going on. And so it is interesting in that kind of context, but the ending just let this book down so badly. And I'd still recommend it if you are a Frankenstein or Pride and Prejudice fan, or you even just like the idea of the premise of this book. But just know that you're probably going to be disappointed with just how the ending was written. Even if it's not the context that you're bothered by, the actual writing format of it, it was just not good. And then I read on my e-reader, sorry, I'm just in the middle of reading something as well. I read the romantasy called The Spellshot by Sarah Beth Durst. It looks like this. So I picked this up because I was talking with my hairstylist about it when I was getting my hair done, and the cover looked cute, and I looked it up. It was 99p. Read the synopsis, said it had a sentient spider plant. I was like, that's cool, that's amazing. Main character is a librarian. Let's go for it. Cozy romantasy. This book is possibly, I hate saying this, I really don't. I don't like saying negative things about books, but this book was really boring. Like, the characters were just flat. The plot was flat. Nothing really happened. And I don't mind that. But the characters really need to carry that forward if there's nothing really happening in a book, right? It's really about the characters. And I just didn't feel that. And yeah. If you're going to call something a romantasy, I picked this up not knowing it was a romantasy, and it was actually, in fact, my sister-in-law messaged me going, "Ooh, I see you're reading a romantasy," because I don't normally read that. And that was when I discovered it was, in fact, a romantasy. But I wouldn't have even known that once I had finished the book, honestly, because, again, nothing happens. So overall, a disappointing read for me. There was a lot of potential, essentially, in this book and with the story. I could see the world being built. The magic was quite interesting, and the characters were being developed. It just never went deeper. And that was just boring for me. There was also a lot of descriptions about like jam and things, which is fine. And again, I don't mind reading that sort of thing, but like you have to make me want to care about reading about those things. And this book just honestly didn't make me care, which I am upset about, because again, I still like there was a minuscule level of enjoyment because I still finished it. I didn't DNF it, although I really wanted to at 50%, but I was like, well, maybe it gets better. And I just didn't mesh well with that book. But many people do love that book. So again, it's really dependent on taste. I never think that just because I think a book is the most boring thing I've ever read doesn't mean that I don't think somebody else could thoroughly enjoy that book, and that's okay. So if you're interested in librarians, very cozy, the mildest romance you will ever read in your entire life, with a bit of magic and bakery descriptions and things, then that might be the book for you. So if that's the case, definitely check it out. But for me, it just wasn't it. And that's all the books that I read in the month of October. So again, the only one that I would definitely highly recommend is Woodworm by Layla Martinez. That was incredible, but the other three, it just depends on what you want from your reading. But now I have a huge stack of books that I have purchased this month, and so I'll try to go through them very quickly. I'm not going to go into too much detail. But the first one that I got was The Color of Revenge by Cornelia Funke. I went to one of her book events for this in Edinburgh, and I got one of my copies of Inkheart signed, and this one's signed as well. It's just so fantastic. Like, there it is. And the event was incredible, and I'm really happy that I got to attend a book event for her, and with a book that is within the world of Inkheart. So exciting. I love these new cover designs. They're stunning. I have not read this yet. I really want to, but I want to reread the entire series before diving into this. And yeah, this one essentially, if you know anything about Inkheart, like I've mentioned it in a few other of my videos, the premise behind it is Meggie, the main character, has the power to read characters aloud from text, essentially. Whereas this, I believe, based off of what was being discussed during the book event, it focuses a lot more on illustrations and other forms of art in relation to that, like, world creation and things. So I know that this focuses on illustration, essentially, and I'm very, very excited about it. Then I picked up, or I ordered online, a copy of Audre Lorde's Sister Outsiders, a collection of various essays, and this is for my PhD research, essentially. I've read some individual essays, and I just thought I wanted to get a full collection so that I could annotate it properly as well, but I haven't read it yet. Then I also ordered, or actually I got my sister-in-law to pick up for me, a copy of Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is essentially like eco-philosophy, focusing on indigenous knowledge and wisdom regarding humanity's relationship with nature and vice versa, and the entanglements there. Thus far, I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm a little bit of my way through, but I am approaching this a bit more slowly, although this is my current read for my thesis, and I know that this will work its way into my research as well, so I'm just trying to take my time with it. Then I got a mystery book. So when I was in Oxford recently, in the month of October, I went in to browse Blackwell's because I used to work at Blackwell's in Edinburgh, and I work in customer order, so it's like anytime we didn't have a book, I was always contacting Oxford because they were the ones that would send out stock. So I went into this bookshop thinking, like, I know it'll be pretty big, but oh my gosh, it was massive. I went into the Nottingham room, and is that what it's called, the Nottingham room? I can't remember now, but it's a huge, like, entire floor of like academic text, like nonfiction, and it was absolutely overwhelming. The entire, like, their philosophy section was so big, and because I went at the end of the day, I was extraordinarily tired, and also had been quite social that day, which is not like, it's quite draining for me as well. So by the time I got there, I was just exhausted, and I kind of looked around. I was way too overwhelmed by just how many books there were, which I can't believe I'm saying that. But then I thought, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't get a book, or maybe we just go upstairs and see if we can find a fiction book. So I went around, I was gonna look for poetry, and then I saw this column of these mystery books where they have, you know, they've written a little blurb on the parcel, like the wrapped book, and if you pick that, you have a mystery book. So I ended up just grabbing one of those because one of the descriptions really stuck out to me as something that I'd possibly enjoy. And so I thought, you know what, I'm too overwhelmed to browse, so I'll just get that, and that can be like my book souvenir from this little trip. And so that's what I did. And I was very worried that I was already going to have the book because it was defined as like feminist dystopian type of a novel. And I was thrilled that I did not already own this book. It's called The Carhulan Army, I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly, by Sarah Hall. And I saw Sarah Hall, and I have read her before. I've read The Ghost Wall? Is that what it's called? I can't remember, but that one I've read, and I've never heard of this before. And the first line says, England is in a state of environmental and economic crisis. So I saw environmental crisis and was thrilled. So this is a sci-fi novel. It's too early in timeline for me to use it as potentially a primary source for my research, but I will be reading this as my fictional reading list for kind of like background and development of climate fiction. And I'm so excited to get into this. Yeah, it says, under the repressive regime of the authority, citizens have been herded into urban centers, and all women of childbearing age fitted with contraceptive devices. And a woman known as Sister leaves her oppressive marriage to join an isolated group of women in a remote northern farm at Carhulan, where she intends to become a rebel fighter. But can she follow their notion of freedom and what it means to fight for? I'm so intrigued by this. I cannot wait. And it's short, so like I feel like I could probably get to it somewhat soon. Then another sci-fi novel, which again will also be on my reading list, is the book 2 of The Marrow Thieves. This is something I mentioned in my last video, because as I was putting together that list for the book newbie tag, I came across, or booktube newbie tag, I'm not a newbie to books. But this came up. I didn't realize that Sherry DeMaline had published a second book in this world from The Marrow Thieves, which I have previously read and absolutely adored. And this is Hunting by Stars. And yeah, so years ago, when plague and natural disasters killed millions of people, much of the world stopped dreaming. Without dreams, people are haunted, sick, mad, and unable to rebuild. So like in The Marrow Thieves, that world is the indigenous peoples are being essentially hunted to extract their bone marrow, because their bone marrow has been discovered to allow people the ability to dream again. And so it's talking a lot about colonization and the exploitation of other bodies. And I cannot wait to dive into the second book, because the first book was so moving. It's won many awards as well in North America. So excited to see how this second installment will work. Then more recently, I purchased this, I don't know why, really. It kept popping up on my screen in various, like Instagram, Facebook, that sort of thing, TikTok. And I was like, you know what? I'm kind of intrigued by this. It's a dark academia text. It's called Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. And this is essentially, it's a dark academia text, and it's looking at this first female scholar allowed into this specific academy and what that means in terms of her own powers. So it says, for 20 years, this is why I don't read fantasy, because I can't pronounce anything. Skiona has devoted every waking moment to the study of magic, fueled by a mad desire to achieve the impossible, to be the first woman ever admitted to the high magistry at the University of Magics and Industry. When Skiona finally passes the qualifying exam and becomes a high mage, she finds her challenges have just begun. Her new colleagues are determined to make her feel unwelcome, and instead of a qualified lab assistant, they give her a janitor. When neither Skiona nor her peers realizes that her taciturn assistant was not always a janitor. 10 years ago, he was a nomadic hunter who lost his family on their perilous journey from the wild plains to the city. But now he sees the opportunity to understand the forces that decimated his tribe, drove him from his homeland, and kept the privileged in power. At first, mage and outsider have a fractious relationship, but working together, they uncover an ancient secret that could change the course of magic forever if it doesn't get them killed first. This sounds incredible. That's why I picked it up. I don't really go for these type of books anymore, but I'm so intrigued, and this might be one of the books I pick up very soon because I do like reading dark academia at this time of the year. And you can very much see by the map here that it is inspired by Oxford. Like, it's not subtle. So yeah, very excited about that one, although she chunky. And then I'm going to show this one first. So the next one that I picked up this month, which I'm also reading currently, is in an ebook form, and it is Blue Sisters by Coco Malors. This is the first time I've bought, I think, a kind of fiction text on my e-reader for full price. Maybe I've bought a few other ones, but this one was not cheap. But this is essentially about four sisters who one of the younger sisters has passed away, and it's her, like, the first anniversary of that death, and the sister who passed away was experiencing chronic pain from a condition called endometriosis, and that is a condition that I have. And so this is a bit of a hard-hitting book for me, but I'm really enjoying it. The sisters are so, like, the characters are so well fleshed out, and their relationships are messy and awkward on purpose, and I love it. The writing is just fantastic, and it's not something that I normally pick up, so I was weary about whether or not I'd be able to get into it. But yeah, really loving this, although I am very afraid of it making me cry. So I foresee that potentially in my future. And then the next two books I'm going to talk about, one is, well, both of them I have purchased for gifts. So I have The North Shore by Ben Tufnell. This I picked up because I wanted to give to a few people in my life, one of them being Kate, when I met up with her in Oxford. And this is a fantastic kind of reimagining of Ovid, but very, like, loose, I'd say, in that retelling. But it is a fantastic combination of literature and art. The author himself was a curator. I've mentioned it in my previous video at the Tate Modern, I believe it was. Tate Britain. And it's such a strange but such a beautiful story, and I think so many more people need to be reading this book. So I am physically making that happen by giving the book. So that's another one that I got. But then the last book I have, if your name is Beth, stop watching. Thank you for watching my videos, but stop watching now because it's a birthday gift that I got for her. The book in question is Feline Philosophy by John Gray. Cats and the Meaning of Life. I'm going to try to read this before I gift it to my sister-in-law because it's short and I'm really interested in this. My sister-in-law studied philosophy in her undergrad and she loves cats, so I thought this was a perfect. She also loves reading. She reads so fast, it's ridiculous. I think that she'll really enjoy this, and I'm excited to read it as well. Like, the first question on the back here is, why can't a human be more like a cat? And I think, you know, why not? Why not? I say that looking at my cat who is asleep on her little mushroom cat tower and loving life. I completely forgot that there was in fact one more book that I picked up this month, and that is one that I've been anticipating quite a lot over the past 2 months or so, is Ali Smith's Glyph. I've never read anything by Ali Smith before, but the premise of this and the fact that It's like apparently there'll be a second book, but in like a year or so, and it's got the same, the name of the book sounds the same, but it's spelt differently. And I guess the meaning or conclusion that you think you have from reading this first book is going to shift drastically reading the second. I'm not entirely sure yet, but the premise sounds very experimental and interesting, and that's what really got me hooked. And also, it's a climate fiction novel. So, and this is a potential thing that could be relevant for my research, so that's also very exciting. But I'll just read the back very quickly. It says, once upon a time, not very far from now, two children come home to find a line of wet red paint around the outside of their house. What does it mean? It's a truism of our time that it'll be the next generation who sort out our increasingly toxic world. What would that actually be like? In a state turned hostile, a world of insiders and outsiders, what things of the past can sustain them, and what shape can resistance take? And what's a horse got to do with any of this? And it's supposed to talk about language and human nature and our interrelations between the two. I'm just really, really excited about this one as well. But yeah, I can't believe I almost forgot that. So that's the conclusion of today's video. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on about these texts. And if you are going to pick up any, let me know. Also, if you have any recent anticipated releases that are coming out, please let me know. I'm super excited about Absolution. I'll be picking that up later this month before an event that I'm going to see Jeff Vandermeer. Very exciting. And yeah, I'll be sure to make another wrap up at the end of November, but otherwise, happy reading!